Good morning. It is about 6, so I slept in a little bit today because we had such a long week last week with the fair. So I need to catch up on stuff that got neglected over the past week. I am going to start some laundry, make breakfast, and then before I can get started with all of my farm chores, I actually need to take the kids into town to do one last task for the fair. So, stripped my sheets. I'm going to throw in a load of cloth diapers first. I always run a rinse cycle before I wash them, so I'll do that and then try to keep this going as I get breakfast made for the kids and see what I can get done before we head out. As I mentioned, much around the homestead was neglected over the past week, including my starter. So I have not touched this thing in a week. But never fear, it will come back alive. It'll take a while to perk back up, but I'm still going to use this discard. There's no mold. My starter is very healthy, so this is just fine. It's just very active. So I'm going to make some discard pancakes here. I have my sourdough discard pancake recipe on my blog, so I will link that in the description for you guys. But at this point, I have made these so many times that I really don't need a recipe. I just know it. In fact, many of the staples in my kitchen, many things that I make are just on repeat. They're variations of the same recipe, so I rarely have to look at a recipe. But, I've been married for a long time. John and I have been together 13 years, all of my adult life pretty much, so this comes in time. If you're learning to cook, I definitely wouldn't recommend not using recipe. Use recipes until you learn what you like, you learn what works, and learn how to modify things. And then, in time you'll find that you don't need recipes. Found little BBs in my bowl here that I'm going to use to test eggs. You gotta be careful with boys. When you have boys in your home, you never know what you're going to find. I'm testing these eggs because if you've been watching, you know that I have broody hens, and you just never know when you're going to get an egg that was sat on for a while, and you never want to crack an egg that could be rotten straight into something that you're making because that'll ruin everything. I've done that before. Got some fresh milk here. So since these are discard pancakes, it's not fully fermented. If you want a fully fermented, truly sourdough pancake recipe, it would need to sit overnight, or you would need to just do something really basic like just starter, a little sugar, and baking soda, which you can do. So it's just Ernie and I awake right now, very quiet. I enjoy early mornings. I usually get up anywhere from 4:30 to 5, which I know sounds crazy if you're not a morning person, but this is just my time. This is when I can get things done and just enjoy the peace and quiet. I know a lot of people are night owls and they feel that way about nighttime, staying up for a couple hours after everybody's in bed. That is not me. I like to go to bed very early. So, early mornings are just my time. I have found that overripe bananas make excellent add-ins to pancakes. Just kind of sweetens it up a little bit, gives a little bit of flavor. And there you go, banana peel. Great toy for a baby to put in the trash. Those actually need to go in my compost or my scrap bucket. So I guess he can just play with that for now. Anyway, I've got a pot of water boiling for my tea. Got the pancake batter almost ready. You can see that it's bubbling up. I love making anything with sourdough because it gets nice and bubbly. And that's just the sourdough starter and the baking soda combo. When you combine baking soda and starter, it rises and very, very bubbly. So you guys know I love my herbal tea. I just can't tolerate coffee. This is a very sad thing for me. I love coffee, but I can't tolerate it regularly. So I do a not coffee herbal tea that tastes kind of like coffee. So you can see the kids are starting to trickle out of their rooms. They're waking up. They knew they needed to be up early this morning to go back into town and do trash pickup at the fair for their 4-H group. So, they're up getting ready. And I am getting my tea ready and gonna make some pancakes here so we can get out the door. I'm a big fan of using bacon grease for pretty much everything. So getting my griddle ready there. This griddle stays on my stovetop. It's not a part of it. It's just a cast iron griddle, but it might be one of my most used kitchen items, if not my most used kitchen items. I just love it. It's so great. It's so well seasoned at this point, and I use it for pretty much everything. My kids are all different. They always have different requests for pancakes. And I don't usually do like short order cooking, but when it comes to pancakes, I can throw blueberries in one and chocolate chips in the other and make a few plain. That's not too difficult. Hopefully, I'm not setting the standard too high for when they're adults. So, my tea is ready here. This is just an egg yolk latte, but with the tea. It is still super delicious.
All right, I just dropped the kids off at the fairgrounds to do trash pickup. Their 4-H group is on trash duty today, post-fair. And I'm going to get in a quick workout. The gym I go to is right by the fairgrounds, connects to it. So the kids can just walk up here when they are finished.
Got my workout in, and my sister was at the gym too, so I got to talk to her for a little bit. Now we are back home. As you can see, it's still very early, so we really did get an early start this morning, but that's not a bad thing. Like I said, I like getting started early, crossing things off my list. So now I need to milk the cow. This is actually going to be the last day that she gets to go back to her calf. Honestly, he's pretty old to be called a calf. We just banded him, so he's technically a steer now, and it's definitely time to wean him. So I'll be getting lots and lots more milk. I'm very excited. Need to put down some straw here. Should have done this before I let her in, but I didn't notice. Yeah, that way the dirt doesn't fly up into my milk. I always like to keep this area strawed, and I do tie her leg usually. That way I don't have to deal with kicking. My girls are pretty good. They really don't kick much, but you know, I don't like spilled milk. I don't like having a full milk bucket that gets kicked over. So this is just one way to make sure that that doesn't happen. And don't worry, it looks like I have her legs stretched back really far. I don't. That's actually her exaggerating and leaning way forward in the head gate. As I milk, you'll kind of see, there you go. See, she's coming back. So I cleaned off her udder, cleaned off her teats, shot some milk out to clear everything out. And I should get about a gallon. I don't know. I actually didn't milk her at all during fair week because we were so busy. But since she had her calf with her, she's fine. Her production will be fine. She was being stimulated. So we'll see how much milk I ended up with. It wasn't as bad as I thought. Sometimes if I don't milk for like a week, her production does go way down, but it always recoups. It goes back up. Cows are like humans. It's supply and demand. So she needs to enjoy this last day nursing her big baby. You'll see he's definitely not a little baby. He's getting to be a big guy. And you can see his man parts back there dangling and looking a little deflated. That's because, like I said, there's a rubber band. So that's going to fall off sometime. And then we will feed him and he will go in the freezer. While I'm out here, I'm going to check. I'm by this particular barn and we have a hen who lays eggs in here. So I'll just check before I forget. I don't want to leave eggs out in this heat. They will go bad quicker than normal. So yeah, I found a few. I fed my starter, so hopefully it perks back up. Because like you saw earlier, it was looking kind of sad. I just did half and half stone ground wheat and then half white flour, some water. This should be perked back up. It takes a little bit longer to wake up when you haven't, when you've neglected it for a week like I have, but it will wake up. I'm confident of that. I've done this many times. All right, I need to strain the milk. I just use a cheesecloth. I don't test my milk, but I don't sell it. Maybe if I sold it, I would test it. That's too much work for me. So we just drink milk straight out of the cow, just like this. No testing, no pasteurization, nothing like that. I want to keep it intact and keep all of the benefits. So yeah, I got about three quarters of a gallon. Not too shabby. Now I'm just going to work on cleaning up the kitchen a little bit. I am so behind on everything, and it's going to take me a couple days to catch up, but that's okay. I also need to think about lunch. Try to think about meals an hour or two, at least an hour or two before it's mealtime, because hungry kids lose patience. They don't have the most patience. So I've got some roast beef here, and I'll probably just make a little bit of soup. I like to kind of partially meal prep by making meat and having veggies washed and prep and everything, but I don't totally meal prep. While I do that, I have kids out picking green beans because I need to can green beans today.
This is a giant basket, and it is full of green beans. The kids picked these.
And I want to get canning pretty soon, but I'm actually going to make supper now because canning can be quite a process, and I don't want to look up and realize it's late, everybody's hungry, and I don't have supper made. So I'm just gonna make some spaghetti. This is one pot spaghetti. I've got a big Dutch oven. I browned some ground beef, onion, and garlic. And now I've got my 2 last quarts of tomato sauce from last year that I'm going to dump in here. And then I'll just let this all simmer. You'll see how I do it. I'll let it all simmer in one pot and it'll be ready for tonight. Then I don't have to think about it. I can just focus on getting my canning finished, and I don't have to worry about hungry people being mad at me because it's really late and we don't have supper. So I went out and picked some herbs from the garden. I always just put in a little bit of everything. I got basil, oregano, parsley, and sage. So just whatever I thought needed to be harvested is what we've got here. And all of this will go into my Dutch oven with my meat sauce here. And once I get my herbs in, then since this is just a one pot recipe, I'm not going to be boiling my pasta in a separate pot. So I am going to add some extra liquid, just a little bit, maybe a cup or two of bone broth into this Dutch oven. Then I'll add my pasta. And this is the pasta that I stored in Mylar bags last year. This is a year old, and I showed you it looks great. So it's just stored for long term with oxygen absorbers in Mylar bags, and I had it in a bucket in my basement. So this was really nice to just pull this out of that bucket and have it ready really quickly. I will link that video if you want to see how I made and stored that pasta. I've got kids still working on chores as I do all of this, of course. We're trying to stay on the laundry.
My starter has indeed perked up just like I knew it would. You can see it's nice and bubbly.
However, I am not going to do any baking right at this moment. So I'll probably stick that in the fridge because we really need to get on these green beans. And before I can can them, we need to snap them. If you've ever done, that's a little bit of a job. So I had the kids helping me. So those are all finished. Now I hot pack my green beans, so I actually blanch them first. So I've got my big stock pot there behind me that I filled with water, and that's heating up for blanching. I have some new quart jars here. Just gonna wash these before I use them. Always a good idea to wash any new thing, whether it's dishes or clothes, before you use or wear, in my opinion. So once these are washed, then I'm just going to put them in the oven to keep them warm. So when you're canning, I have entire videos on the process of canning. This is not going to be a step-by-step tutorial, but everything needs to stay hot. So you can keep your jars hot, in several ways. A lot of people run them through the dishwasher. Lots of ways to do that, but today I'm just gonna put these in my oven. It's actually still warm from when I used it earlier, so that'll be good enough. I've got my stock pot over there that I'm going to do the blanching in, and now I'm going to get my pressure canner ready too. Like I said, I want to keep everything hot and work quickly. So I got a little water in the bottom of my pressure canner, and that's just heating up a little bit. So I'm going to start blanching green beans. I'll have to do a few batches here because this basket is just huge. It's a lot of green beans right here. I'm curious to see how many quarts I get. I prepped 12 jars, but I can always get more jars out if I need to wash them, warm them up, and that'll be just fine. I actually have two of these big pressure canners. Well, you can see there, these purple Blauhilde beans, they do turn green when you cook them. So just by blanching them, they're already turning green. Um, anyway, I've got two big pressure canners, so I can can 14 quarts at a time, I believe, and that really, really helps. So it's getting a little bit later in the evening, and my little man wants to be held. I do have a baby carrier that I put him in sometimes, but he's kind of at that age where he doesn't want to stay in there very long, so it's not always worth putting him in there. Okay, so my first batch of green beans is blanched. I just blanched for a few minutes. Now I'm going to do the hot packing, just stuff as many as I can down into these quart jars and leaving an inch head space, an inch or so. And then I need to get another batch of green beans blanching. Like I said, I just want to keep this process rolling, and it actually looks like my 12 jars not going to be enough, so I'll get some more out. Now, when canning, I usually do burn myself at some point, which I did this time on something hot. So have some of this all-purpose salve from Earthly. Works like a charm. All right, now I've got all my jars packed. Just going to add my salt. I'm doing a teaspoon of salt in each jar. This is Redmond real salt. This is the only salt I use. It works great for canning as well. Now that the salt is in, I'm just going to ladle some of that water that I use for blanching into each jar. And like I said, an inch headspace. So you can measure. I've done this enough to know what an inch is, like where that falls on the jar. So I can just eyeball it at this point. And once I get all of these jars filled, then I will need to take this little bitty ladle I have and try to get all the bubbles out by just going around the edges. I actually have a silicone tool for removing bubbles, but I can't find it. So this is my daughter's little, did I call this a ladle? I think I called it a ladle. It's not a ladle, it's a little spatula. But you know what? It's doing the trick. Just removing all the bubbles helps me pack everything in tighter before going on to clean the jars and add the lid. So I actually clean the tops, the rims of the jars with vinegar. So this washcloth is soaked in vinegar. And someone on here actually gave me that tip when I did my canning tutorial. And it was someone who commented and said something like, "Oh, I've been canning for 50 years." And I do this and I never have a bad seal. So when somebody says they've been canning for a really long time and they have success with something, I listen. Anyway, so now I've got my rings and lids on, and I'm just gonna start the process here. It is, like I said, it's later in the evening. I actually don't like to be doing anything in the kitchen or housework or anything later in the evening because I'm just not an evening person. I like to do my work in the morning, but when it's preserving season, like this time of year, that just is what it is. You know, you only have so many hours in a day, and when you start a project, it needs to get finished. You can't waste food. I guess you could, but I'm not gonna let these green beans that we snapped go to waste. So in the later part of the summer, you will often find me finishing up projects like canning and cheese making in the later evening hours, even though I would much rather be relaxing. I think I mentioned I go to bed pretty early when I can too, so I actually can get a little bit crabby in the evening. Maybe some of you all can relate. I've got my second canner full, so I'm just gonna let these vent for 10 to 15 minutes while I get the baby to sleep. And then I will finish up the canning process and let these jars rest on the counter overnight so that the seals are fully set. And that wraps it up for my busy day of homesteading, catching up here around the house, and with everything that needed to get done. I really do love summertime. However, there is just so much more work to be done in the summer. And, living on the farm, I have just developed an entirely new appreciation for wintertime and the rest that comes along with that season. But for now, I'm just going to embrace the long days and the hard work because summer will be over before you know it.